Our next guest is Austin Chambers. He's the executive director and president of the Republican State Leadership Committee. It's a political organization designed to assist Republicans in capturing and holding control of state legislatures across the country. Mr. Chambers, welcome to Breitbart News Sunday.
Well, thank you, Joel. It's great to be on with you, and thanks for highlighting the importance of redistricting across the country. You're absolutely right. No one in Washington draws their own map. It's going to be left up to the state leaders across the country. So thanks for shining the light on it.
You are quite welcome. Now, let me ask about the general state of state races. Every state is different, and it's very hard to generalize, which is why we normally don't use national platforms to discuss state races in general. But because the census is happening this year, it is a national state election, if you can put it in those terms. What is the state of the race for state houses across America?
Look, right now everything's on the line in the states, and the Democrats understand that. Eric Holder and Barack Obama have teamed up together to raise money for state-level candidates. They're not focused on the presidential race. They're raising millions of dollars and pouring them into these local state legislative elections because they're trying to win back the nearly 1,000 seats that Democrats lost when Barack Obama was president, and they're trying to help Nancy Pelosi strengthen her grip on Congress. So everything's on the line, but the good news is in our target states right now, the 14 states that are extremely important, most of them overlap with the president's priorities as well, and Republicans are in good shape. We got a lot of work to do over the next 58 days as we go into Labor Day here and then look beyond. But things are in good shape right now. Republicans are fired up, and the Democrats can't decide if they want to hide in the basement or if they want to come out and campaign. They go back and forth every day on it.
Now, you mentioned that Eric Holder and Barack Obama are involved in many of these state races. One of the things they're pushing is for these independent redistricting commissions to take the power of redistricting out of the hands of politicians and put that power in the hands of supposedly neutral experts. Now, I can tell you from our experience here in California, those experts are not neutral. The Democrats gamed the system here in California so that the supposedly neutral commission would draw the districts and eliminate Republican seats, which is what they did. I think we had 5 fewer Republican seats after the supposedly independent commission had done its work. In fact, they probably got away with more dirty tricks with the independent commission because they could always pretend it was independent. Is that happening in a lot of states? Are you going to see that phenomenon in other states as well after this next census?
Look, Democrats are willing to pull any trick they can think of to try and cling on to power. And sometimes they hide behind the guise of, we want an independent commission because they think it's going to give them the best districts. But listen to this hypocrisy. Right now in Virginia, a state that Democrats took control of, the independent redistricting commission is on the ballot. It was put on the ballot last year. Republicans and Democrats, bipartisan, came together, put it on the ballot. Democrats were all for it. Then they took control, realized they were going to be in charge of redistricting. Now they're coming out against the independent commission. For them, this isn't about policy. They could give a rip less about what the policy is. They want what's going to give them the most power, what's going to give them the best districts so that they can strengthen Nancy Pelosi's grip on Congress. So where it's good for them, they're all out there singing and praising these ridiculous independent commissions. Where it's bad for them, they're calling them racist and saying that independent commissions are a bad thing. So it's a joke. It's all politics for Eric Holder and Barack Obama, and they're just looking for ways they can win elections.
All right, let's talk a little bit about state-level issues. Now, many of the criticisms of President Trump have been about things that are actually in the control of governors when it comes to coronavirus restrictions, for example, schools reopening, that sort of thing. How are those issues playing? I know that from our coverage of Pennsylvania, for example, there's been a huge shift against the Democratic administration in Pennsylvania because voters are unhappy with how that state government has handled the coronavirus. How is it playing out elsewhere? Are there other states where lockdowns, shutdowns, or education policy, for example, or even criminal justice with all these riots and the movement to defund the police, how are these big national themes playing out in some of the key state elections coming up in 2020?
Yeah, they're absolutely playing out. And what you see is where you've got great Republican governors who've managed COVID the right way, you see great positive results, and where you've got these Democrat governors who've locked everything down and had all these shutdowns that continue, you've got people who are fired up, ready to throw them out. I mean, the state of today's Democrat Party is one where if you're not rioting or looting or burning stuff in the street, they want you locked down and in your house. Everybody else needs to stay inside, but the rioters and the looters can come out. And I think folks are starting to see through all this nonsense. And Republicans are putting forward good plans of how we can safely reopen this country, how we can safely get people back to work, how we can safely get people back to school, how we can have sports this fall, how we can have high school football and, have all these college sports back, et cetera. Folks want to get back to life. They want to get back to the best sense of normalcy they can while still being smart and safe about it. And that's what Republicans are doing, while Democrats just hide inside, but yet let rioting and looting happen and then call it peaceful protesting. So people are, I think, just getting over. I think people are over it, Joel.
Now, what about the potential for surprises? Here in California, we have two state houses, the Senate and the Assembly, with Democratic supermajorities, and they have been able to control just about everything happening in the state. But there's a lot of frustration with coronavirus. There's also frustration with what Democrats haven't delivered to their own constituents. They failed to produce any sort of police reform or major police reform legislation, for example. This is the complaint we've heard the last few days from commentators, that Democrats adjourned their legislative session without doing anything on police reform after they all made speeches and marched and took the knee and all that stuff. They went home. They didn't do anything. The only really noteworthy reform was a change in the sexual offender laws that was passed by Democrats. This incredible change that means people who commit statutory rape essentially don't have to register as sex offenders if they're less than 10 years older than the person they raped. It's so bizarre. So the Democrats are trying to make these sentences more lenient. They got rid of cash bail a year or two ago, but they didn't really do anything on police reform. They haven't delivered for their own constituents. Are we going to see any surprises in blue states or maybe even red states? Are we going to see any kind of a rebellion? Are there any states you're looking at where we might see something unexpected?
Yeah, look, Minnesota's a state we absolutely need to keep an eye on. As the state has burned and riots and protesting has continued, I think there's going to be a big backlash against the Democrats there. But the point you made about the Democrat supermajorities is an important one. Democrats don't give a rip about policy. All they care about is giving speeches and winning elections. They talk about all these great things, but they never do any of it. What I'm worried about, though, is these radicals we've got in Congress right now will actually try and act on some of this and raise taxes to, 60 or 70% on the top bracket, pass the Green New Deal, some of these things. But when you look at people like Joe Biden, I mean, he's been there for 47 years. If he really cared about getting anything done, he would have done it already. And that's the way most of these Democrats are. They just care about giving speeches and winning elections. But we can't give them the opportunity to have the power to move their dangerous ideas, or we're going to regret it.
Let me ask you about the Second Amendment. Again, states tend to set most of the regulations. The Second Amendment has become very, very important. With all this defund the police stuff, people are showing a greater interest in firearms ownership. Even here in California, long lines outside the gun stores, and not all of them are conservatives. Liberals lining up for guns, too. Is gun control on the agenda if Democrats win in November, or is it basically a dead letter?
I think they've already shown that gun control's on the agenda. Just look at the states they've taken over recently and some of the dangerous policies they've pushed forward, from strengthening gun laws to adding new gun laws to the books to even talking about gun confiscation, what types of guns you can own, how many guns you can own, who can own them. I mean, look, everybody's freedom is at risk if the Democrats take over. And the Second Amendment is just one example of areas where the government is going to come infringe on your freedoms if the Democrats are in charge.
Do you think they're going to succeed in flipping some of these red states to blue, like Arizona, Texas? They've been targeting Georgia. Are we going to see a shift in those directions?
Look, I think the Republicans at the end of the day are going to be successful. There's going to be a big fight over the next 58 days. Republicans need to leave everything on the field. We can't take anything for granted. Everyone who's coming out to support the president has to vote Republican all the way down the ballot, or the Democrats could win. But if we do our job, if president supporters turn out and vote, if we rally them to go all the way down ballot, I think we're going to be successful. We're going to push back against this narrative that the Democrats have all the momentum and the Democrats are making gains. And I think we're going to do better than people think. But certainly we got a lot to defend.
Let me ask you real quick, 10 seconds. Is President Trump a plus factor or a minus factor for state and local Republican candidates?
He's a plus factor. We've got 115 seats that Donald Trump won in 2016 that are currently held by a Democrat. He's key to us winning those seats and holding these majorities in state legislatures.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you can join us again. Austin Chambers, Executive Director of the Republican State Leadership Committee and President of that group, working on electing Republicans nationwide at the state and local level. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Joel.
All right. Breitbart News Sunday returns with more about the upcoming 2020 election in a very special edition of Breitbart News Sunday.